Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
This is going to be a tough climb for her.
Opening statements soon begin in the highly anticipated trial of Elizabeth Holmes. What prosecutors will have to prove in order to convict the former Theranos CEO. Plus, the latest update in the Murdaugh murder cases out of South Carolina. Months after the deaths of his wife and son, Alex Murdaugh now says he was targeted too. And as the Supreme Court upholds the Texas law prohibiting nearly all abortions, high-profile companies are backing pro-choice Texans with legal support and donations.
The defendant intended to kill Susan Berman.
After weeks in the courtroom, both sides have now rested in the trial of Robert Durst. Hear more gripping testimony ahead of closing arguments. Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Opening statements begin this week in the trial of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of the blood testing company accused of defrauding investors, companies, and patients. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with what to expect from this long-anticipated trial.
Brian, Elizabeth Holmes and her company Theranos were the toast of Silicon Valley until her claims about what her blood testing could do began to unravel.
What do you dream for?
That less people have to say goodbye too soon to people they love.
That was Elizabeth Holmes years ago, explaining what she believed her blood testing technology could do. Her company, Theranos, was once valued at $9 billion, with the family of Betsy DeVos, New England's Patriots owner Robert Kraft, and Rupert Murdoch investing. But prosecutors say Theranos was a scam, and Holmes faces federal wire fraud charges, accused of defrauding investors. Law and Crime's Adam Klasfeld has followed the case.
She is being charged federally, and most often federal prosecutors do not lose. If you look at the statistics, it's very well upwards of 90% and conviction rate.
But prosecutors will have to prove Holmes willfully defrauded investors, knowing the testing technology and her Addon testing machine were bogus. Holmes was a 19-year-old Stanford University dropout when she founded Theranos.
You all are part of something that is going to change our world. What higher purpose is there?
She's been described as charming and garnered a lot of media attention.
I think that definitely her defense attorneys want to play up the fact that this has gotten an exceptional amount of media coverage, that she had this reputation as the youngest female self-made billionaire, that it all came crashing down with the Wall Street Journal expose, Bad Blood, and became a documentary.
Holmes is expected to argue in part that she was misled about the company and technology by her then boyfriend, Ramesh Sunny Balwani, who she now claims abused her physically and sexually. Balwani has denied the claims in legal documents.
We're going to see new dimensions of her defense, of her arguments, and of the case as a whole.
Now, this trial is taking place in federal court, so unfortunately, cameras and audio streams are not allowed, but we'll still keep you up to date on what happens. Meanwhile, Sunny Balwani's trial is scheduled to begin next year. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is defense attorney Matt Mangino and Terry Austin. Matt, typically speculations about who the defendant is dating now, what house they're living in during the trial would not come in at trial. But where Holmes is accusing her ex and co-defendant of abuse that contributed to these crimes, are these now fair game?
Well, I think everything is on the table once you begin to present a defense that part of your actions in this case were the result of being battered, of being sexually abused. I think it's fair game then to come back as a prosecutor and say, well, hey, you kind of rebounded from your bad relationship, and now you have a child, you have a new boyfriend, and you're living in a palatial estate while this trial is pending.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays into effect of this entire case. Her whole life is going to be under a microscope, where Elizabeth Holmes came out and said this technology was basically going to change the world. Terry, a local jury has been selected. Do you think people from the Silicon Valley will be sympathetic to a defense that Holmes was faking it until she made it, something common in the tech world? Or could that backfire?
It could backfire. I think jurors understand that Silicon Valley startups often walk this thin line between exaggeration and deception. And the real question is whether or not Holmes intentionally tried to deceive them. I've been following this case from the very beginning, and she repeatedly claimed that these machines were able to diagnose blood issues and conditions just from a small prick and a couple of drops of blood. But employees were trying to say to her that the machines were inconclusive, that they weren't working, that they weren't reliable, and she continued to ignore them. So some of them actually even left their jobs because they thought they were being ignored. So it's going to come down to what she knew and when did she know it. She could potentially face 20 years in prison as well.
Absolutely. And Jeanette, Holmes' trial has been delayed because of the pandemic, but there was another reason for the delay too, right?
Elizabeth Holmes actually became a mom in July. She gave birth to a little boy, a baby boy rather, and that caused a fourth delay in the trial on top of those COVID-19 pandemic related delays. So it's not clear how the jury will perceive her being a new mom. Is that going to have an impact on how they perceive her or view her or the evidence? We'll just have to wait and see. But she is a new mom to an infant.
Yeah, and my understanding, there will be time allotted for her during the trial to step out and go and nurse. Many people speculating that maybe she did this intentionally to garner sympathy from the jury, because of course a jury will think about whether or not they're going to send someone to jail with a newborn. But of course, we will see how that all plays out. Thank you, everyone. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the South Carolina attorney shot in the head, surviving months after his wife and son were shot dead on their family property. Plus, days before sentencing in the deadly hit and run, South Dakota's Attorney General is stopped for speeding. The new body cam video next.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. We turn to South Carolina for the murder mystery of a mother and son shot dead. Now, the father says he too was shot in the head. Alex Murdaugh called police on Saturday saying he had been shot while changing a flat tire. Murdaugh is a member of the prominent South Carolina legal family. In June, Murdaugh called 911 to report finding the bodies of his wife Maggie and their son Paul shot dead near dog kennels on the family's hunting property. The spotlight quickly turned to son Paul. He was indicted in a boat crash that killed 19-year-old Mallory Beach. After Paul's death, investigators also looked into the 2015 death of a teenager. Now, Alex Murdaugh is recovering, saying in a statement on Monday, "The murders of my wife and son have caused an incredibly difficult time in my life. I've made a lot of decisions that I truly regret. I am resigning from my law firm and entering rehab after a long battle that has been exacerbated by these murders." Hours after that statement, the law firm responded saying his resignation came after the discovery that Alex misappropriated funds. A forensic accounting firm will be retained to conduct a thorough investigation. Law enforcement and the South Carolina Bar have been notified. The firm was founded 100 years ago by Randolph Murdaugh. He, along with Alex's grandfather and great-grandfather, all served as the top prosecutor of 4 counties in Lower South Carolina. Let's bring back defense attorney Matt Mangino and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, unfortunately, prosecutors and their families can be a target of a lot of people's hate, and the Murdaughs have been prosecutors in the area for decades. Do you think Alex Murdaugh's shooting is isolated or connected to something bigger?
Brian, I think that there are no coincidences in this world, and you just have too many successive things going on. First, the wife and son are shot dead. Then he has a superficial gunshot wound to the head. Then he is misappropriating his law firm's funds. And then he says he made bad decisions and he's checking into a rehabilitation center. So either there is this huge conspiracy against him, or he could even be implicated in all of these crimes. I think ballistics at the end of the day is going to show us what happened and where these guns came from. So I think that's going to be very important.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see the trajectory of that bullet and how that comes up. Matt, this all comes on the heels of accusations of misappropriating funds at Murdaugh's firm. What do you make of the allegations and Murdaugh's cryptic message about leaving the firm?
Well, you can speculate that this is something to do with a client's trust fund. Lawyers have trust funds in which they put clients' money in to hold. Typically, when you talk about embezzlement or misappropriation, you're talking about a trust fund where you're holding clients' funds and then you use those funds as your own. That's a fundamental issue with regard to lawyers and their professional responsibility. It ultimately leads normally to some sort of discipline, whether it's suspension or disbarment. So it's a very serious matter to use clients' funds as your own.
Absolutely. A lot of investigations surrounding the Murdaugh family. We've got death, misappropriation of funds, but of course, when we get the information, we'll be sure to present it to you, our viewers here at the Law and Crime Daily. Turning now to new video into our newsroom of South Dakota Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg at a traffic stop just days before his sentencing related to last summer's deadly hit and run. Officers say he was speeding in a residential area and wasn't carrying any identification.
The reason I stopped is doing 57 and a 35.
South Dakota's Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg was stopped for speeding in late August. He did not have his license on him and made no mention of his name or position.
This is all I need.
Yeah,
right here.
I don't have my license with me. I just went and got a bulb quick at the store, and I thought, hell, I might as well run and get the recyclables.
This citation was Ravnsborg's 7th speeding ticket since 2014 and came shortly before he was supposed to appear in court.
For you. You are receiving a written citation today for your speed. Like I said, I had you at 57 and the 35. Up here's where we were at. Here's your information. Here's the violation itself. It'll be $177.50.
Days later, Ravnsborg pled no contest to 2 misdemeanor charges for a fatal hit and run in which the Attorney General struck and killed Joe Beaver while he was driving home from a fundraiser in September 2020. He was found guilty of improper lane change and using a mobile device while driving. He was also charged with 1 count of careless driving. Ravnsborg received no jail time for the incident, but was fined $500 for each misdemeanor count. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, a contentious Supreme Court shutdown means most abortions are illegal in the state of Texas. How major rideshare companies are pushing back in support of the pro-choice movement. Plus, after weeks of back and forth, both sides have now rested in the lengthy trial of real estate heir Robert Durst. What you need to know ahead of Tuesday's closing statements. Now we go to California, where both sides have rested in Robert Durst's murder trial. Robert Durst is on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, who was found with a bullet wound in her head in her Benedict Canyon home back in 2000. The real estate heir previously denied ever writing the infamous cadaver note, but later confessed that he did send the note to hopefully lead police officers to Berman's body. Before admitting to the note, he told the Jinx documentary director, Angie Jarecki, that whoever wrote the cadaver note must have been the person that killed Berman. After sending the letter, Robert Durst left the area, making the 8-hour drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco and bought a plane ticket to New York.
I decided that I wanted to get far away from Los Angeles. I decided to go to San Francisco. I drove to the terminal. I might have turned the car off. I might have left it running. But I took my bag that I had taken with me to Los Angeles. I got out of the SUV and left it at the terminal and went to the first gate that I came to, and bought a ticket to New York.
Both sides rested last week, and closing arguments are set to begin on Wednesday. Before adjourning, Judge Mark Wyndham gave the jury special instructions, reminding them what the state had to prove for a special circumstance murder.
The defendant is charged with a special circumstance of murder of a witness. To prove that this special circumstance is true, the people must prove that 1, the defendant intended to kill Susan Berman. 2, Susan Berman was a witness to a crime. 3, the killing was not committed during the commission of the crime to which Susan Berman was a witness. And 4, the defendant intended that Susan Berman be killed to prevent her from testifying in a criminal proceeding. For this special circumstance allegation to be true, the defendant must believe the victim will be a witness in a criminal prosecution.
When we come back, the latest in the arson trial of Stanley Ford out of Arkansas, Ohio. We hear from the case's fire investigator who breaks down what happened in the victim's last moments. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We turn now to Ohio, where Stanley Ford is on trial for setting 3 fires that killed 9 people. Stanley Ford is accused of setting 2 homes and 1 vehicle on fire. The 2 house fires resulted in 9 deaths, including an entire family. If convicted, Ford could face a death penalty. The first home belonged to Gloria Jean Hart and Lindell Lewis. Neighbors testify that Ford had previous issues with Lewis. Before court adjourned for the long weekend, fire investigator Brian Peterman took the stand to talk about his observations when investigating the home.
And ultimately, did you make an opinion as to whether this was an accidental or intentionally set fire?
Yes, I did.
All right. What was that opinion?
That it was an incendiary fire, that it was an intentionally set fire.
And where would the origin have been?
The origin would have been on the front porch of the house.
Which?
On the west side.
Okay. And that opinion that you're giving here today, is that within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
All right.
We also heard from Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lisa Kohler, who determined that besides inhaling all of the smoke, Gloria Jean Hart was perfectly healthy when she died.
So basically, aside from the smoke inhalation, her body was pretty healthy.
Died from the burns, or they didn't die from the burns in this case, correct?
Correct. In this situation, they are dying from inhaling all of the smoke and having a high level of carbon monoxide in their system.
All right. And for you as a doctor, how do you determine that? How do you see that?
Well, we will see the soot lining the airways because we're taking out the throat organs and taking out the lungs, and we can see the black soot deep down into the airways.
Turning now to fallout from the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the Texas abortion law. It's one of the most contentious abortion rulings since the 1973's historic Roe v. Wade case. Back in May, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed the bill into law, stating any fetus with an audible heartbeat cannot be aborted. In most cases, that means any pregnancy passing the 6-week mark is ineligible for abortion, regardless of whether rape, sexual abuse, or incest played a role in the conception. The law also allows individuals to sue doctors or abortion clinics suspected of performing abortions after the 6-week mark. Just last week, the United States Supreme Court refused to block the law, upholding the original law. Following the Supreme Court's decision, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a statement on Labor Day, saying in part, quote, "While the Justice Department urgently explores all options to challenge Texas SB 8 in order to protect the constitutional rights of women and other persons, including access to abortion, we will continue to protect those seeking to obtain or provide reproductive health services pursuant to our criminal and civil enforcement of the FACE Act." Under the 1994 FACE Act, physical force or the threat of force is prohibited against those seeking to use or providing reproductive health care. Meantime, a bright spot for the pro-choice Texans, as the rideshare companies Lyft and Uber pledged to pay the legal fees of drivers who would be sued under Texas's law. The law states anyone who aids or abets a restricted abortion may face civil action. In an email from Lyft, the company pledges to cover 100% of drivers' legal fees and donate $1 million to Planned Parenthood. All right, let's break down some of these potential arguments that our very own Aaron Keller actually wrote about on lawandcrime.com. Matt, what do you make of the argument that if a person files a claim based on the Texas anti-abortion law, that they are in essence a private attorney general, and defendants may have a civil rights claim against them?
Right, Brian, they're acting under color of law. This statute was enacted for the specific purpose of trying to intimidate people who might help in some way provide services for someone who's seeking an abortion. I think it's fitting that you use the 1983 Civil Rights Statute, which was created back after the Civil War to curb the Ku Klux Klan's efforts to intimidate people exercising their right to vote. Now it's going to be used to eliminate people from intimidating women who have a right to make decisions about their own body, their own reproductive questions and issues to be resolved. So it's very interesting and fitting that 1983 is something that Attorney General Garland is talking about.
Exactly. Now, Terry, that covers the civil angle. But are there any criminal repercussions for people who may bring an action under the new law or actually try to stop people from getting abortions?
Well, actually, Brian, the United States Code actually provides for penalties if you have two or more people who are conspiring to either injure or to prohibit people from actually exercising their constitutional rights, like the right to get an abortion. And the statute carries penalties actually up to 10 years. So it's a serious enforcement action. And, you know, it could get even more years if there is kidnapping involved or attempted murder. And you have to think about the situations that might start with this new law. They might get very volatile. You might have people shouting at each other if you have demonstrations. And I could very well see the possibility that it could result in some injury. So you could have the civil criminal penalty and, you know, you can have the criminal penalty. So I think there's a lot of penalties involved.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the coming years. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.